moment just to make sure that we are caught up with all the videos and make sure I have all my S together. All right, let's do it. Good morning, podcasters. Today is Thursday, May the 21st, 2026, and today an OSHA article sparks our conversation on podcast growth, search visibility, paid promotion, and why simply publishing everywhere doesn't guarantee the right listeners to find you. So if you're listening live on Clubhouse, hit the share button, top right-hand side of the screen, and share it however Clubhouse lets you. And if you're catching us via podcast, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc., please share this episode with a fellow podcaster. And now give us about 30 seconds, and we'll get things rolling. Thanks for being here. The Podcasting Morning Show is powered by Ironic Media, helping podcasters launch, polish, and grow great shows. And by Content Creators Accountant, helping creators build real business behind their content. Good morning again, Podcasting Morning Show. Thank you so much for being here. I am your host, Mark Ronick, and currently on stage with me, my co-hosts, we have D.R. Fay, Ralph Estep, Jonathan Howard, Jason Sircone, Matt Bliss, and I think that's everybody. Pardon me, I'm just not on top of my game today. As I've shared with everybody over the past few days, my wife has been in the hospital. And the good news is she's home as of yesterday afternoon. We've got a little bit of a road ahead of us, but we are ready to take on that challenge. And like I said yesterday, I would like to share more details with you. I'm not holding back because I personally feel like, I have to be super private. But I'm more respecting the privacy of my wife and the request of my wife to not go around and publicize this everywhere. But it's not super private enough. Like, I think eventually I can share this with you guys, but the good news is nothing life-threatening here, and we've got some healing to do. So thank you to all of you who have sent your support, your love, your prayers. It is felt and very appreciated. So with that, let me quickly remind you once again about our Spotlight series. This is where we want to put you, our community members, in the spotlight. So if you want to be featured on this very show for free with no strings attached, all you got to do is send a 60-second clip about your show, something that gives people a real feel for your podcast. And I want to say that I've been thinking about this. If you have a 60-second trailer that you use for your podcast on Apple and Spotify, YouTube, wherever you use your trailer, as long as it's within 60 seconds, I'm okay with you submitting that too. So it doesn't have to just be you doing a separate recording, introducing your show to us, telling us about who your show's for, what problem it's solving, etc. But so if you have that, you can do that, or you can provide us with a trailer. All you have to do is go to podcastingmorningshow.com/spotlight, and then you can fill out the short form, submit your clip, and be on your merry way, and we'll take the rest from there. We are going to play another one tomorrow on the show, so stay tuned to hear if yours is going to be the one that we play, and we appreciate you. Thank you for playing along with us. Matt, did you have something?
Mark, I like to use Taylor Swift as the music for my trailers. Can I submit my trailer to you?
No, sir, you cannot do that, Matt. Thank you for that setup. That was a nice little softball you threw over my way. Yeah, no licensed music, please. We want only music that we're allowed to play on this show. So, yeah, that's a good reminder to all of you. Okay, so today the conversation is inspired by an article from OSHA. And it was going to be something that we were going to talk about yesterday, but we ran out of time during our news segment. So I figured there was a lot to chew on in this article. And also I've learned that there are some opinions from the cast and crew about this article as well. So we might dig into that too. But again, where I have not been at my desk a lot this week and didn't have a ton of time to prepare, co-host, co-producer Ralph Estep took the liberty of preparing this one for me. So what I've asked is Ralph will lead the discussion. I'll lead the conversation starters, if you will, the prompts for you guys to help dig deeper into this article. So with that, Ralph, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good morning, everybody. And so as Mark mentioned earlier, we're talking about one of the biggest traps in podcasting. And that's thinking that because your show is on Spotify or Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube, or any other app, your audience can automatically find you. So we got to start off with an uncomfortable question for the morning. Is your podcast distributed or is it discoverable? And that's where this report comes in. This is OSHA's 2026 report on podcast growth strategy. And it says half of podcast listeners open up their listening app specifically to discover something new. And that means that Apple Podcasts and Spotify are not just libraries, they're search engines and they're storefronts. They're audience acquisition channels. And if we accept that that's true, then the way we title shows, the way we title episodes, the way we write our descriptions, keywords we choose, the publishing consistently and promoting with paid ads all has to change. That stat changes the whole conversation because a lot of creators are doing the hard work. They're recording, they're editing, they're publishing, they're promoting on social, they're sending newsletters, maybe even buying ads. Raise my hand, I do that. But inside the actual listening apps, they may be invisible. So before we get to the report, let's open this up. Do you actually know how new listeners find your show, or are you guessing? That's really where I'm going to start the conversation today. Do you actually know how new listeners find your show, or are you just guessing on how they're finding it?
I'll start. I think I'm going to admit, for me in this show, I think I'm doing a little more guessing than I am actually researching, right? Because I think that my problem is, and by the way, do as I say, not as I do, right? It's like I wouldn't encourage this to any of my clients, but I think when it's my own show, I neglect it sometimes. I think that it's important for what I do specifically. I go in, I look at my podcast hosting platform, and I look at where are people listening more, right? Where specifically? Are they on Apple? Are they on Spotify? Or are they on my website? And podcastingmorningshow.com does seem to get a lot of traffic as far as how people are consuming my show, our show, but I don't really know if that's how they're finding it. Right? I'm just making that assumption. I'm just tying that together. But I have no idea really, is that how they originally found it? Or did they just find it somewhere else and then find their place of preference to consume the show? So I don't think I do a good job of researching really how people are finding it. I'm curious, some of you guys, maybe Jason, I know you've got a show, and please share the name of your show too. Let's get some people to listen to that awesome show. But how about you? What do you find yourself guessing, or do you actually research that stuff?
I wouldn't say that I fully dive into like full-blown research. I would say that I limit the number of places that I talk about my show. But I mean, I guess, like I said, like I don't post on Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and LinkedIn and Instagram and across the board. Like I've mainly been focused on Threads and LinkedIn lately. And I would say that what I've really been focused on is the SEO side. And I think it's too early in the game still for me, since I just rebranded the show. I mean, I'm a few months into the rebrand of the show now, but I still feel like I am accumulating data to really get an accurate depiction of where people are coming from. But every episode is built with SEO in mind. And I'm really trying to position the show to be found in that podcast SEO discoverability phase. And I feel like I've been monitoring that, and the show has been moving up the rankings for certain keywords. And I just want to keep doubling down on that, because I feel like that intentional search is really going to tell the story as the show continues to grow.
And that show, Podcasting Strategy Simplified. That's the name of it. Yes. So check Jason's show out. You might find an episode or two with me over there as well. And I know we've got one in the works as well, Jason, with me, you, and Rich, right?
Yes, we
Cool.
got to make that happen soon. I've heard about this conference that's 3 months away to the date.
Yes, I think it's called Empowered Podcasting, I believe. Yeah,
Yes.
yes. All right, cool. I think Matt Bliss wanted to chime in as well. Go ahead, Matt. Oh, Matt? We are waiting for him. There he is.
Good?
Yes, we're good. And then we're going to hear from Alex after you. Go ahead.
Very good. So I want to expand people's minds a little bit, because it's easy to look at the data that you have from the platforms and the websites and keyword and pixel tracking and all that stuff, and think that that's all of the story. But you have to consider all of the aspects of your influence that might bring you to your podcast. Like Jason, for example, I'd say some of his search would be, some of his discovery would be people looking for a podcasting podcast that can give them advice. That'd be on the platforms. But some people looking for a strategist that wants to improve their podcast. And then the podcast listener is someone who's looking for that trust and credibility test. Same for you, Mark, or anyone else who's a regular contributor to this show. You've got a conference, you've got Ironic Media, you speak on panels at other places. There are so many points of entry for people to find the podcast that sometimes the only way to find that out is to ask the audience directly.
Yeah.
And get that from them. And sometimes they don't even remember. But I think the only way to do that is to ask.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? I think that a lot of us as podcasters, where we're in this digital world, that's the world we focus on. But there are other areas, like you're pointing out, real life, real world situations that might require a little more one-on-one conversation, or maybe one-to-group conversation, but you have to actually reach out and ask. Yeah, so I agree with you there, Matt. Thank you for that. Alex, you wanted to chime in. Good morning.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to give a more long-winded answer than Matt.
Hang on, that's my territory. You can't do that.
Exactly. And there's going to be an intermission from what I'm going to say, so get your popcorn. Now, seriously, one of the things that we forget to do, and I love all these answers because they're all a starting point. And we also have to look at ourselves as podcasters. What do we actually search? How do we actually search things? And I think the problem is, and when Ralph first started, it's very easy to think, I want listeners, I want this. Instead of thinking I want, think about how I consume content. Where do I go? What are the searches that I go? And then you can take a little bit of what Jason did, which is work with the SEO. And I say this because when I was listening to everybody, there's a ton of people that do show reviews. And I was in that game for a while, and I kind of stepped back a little bit. And I think by looking at what your competitors are doing, I think that's one way of doing it. But also looking at what pops into your feed and why it pops into your feed. Just take a step back and think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And like Matt said, everybody's got 100 different interests. We're not just one person. We're not only focused on one thing. So yes, there is many avenues that we can go into. So it's not wrong to focus in on one or two things. But at the same time, you don't want to do everything. You don't want to do 20 things. But at the same time, every so often, maybe you want to just do that extra SEO for that 20th thing. Does that make sense to everybody?
Does.
And what's your opinion on all that? I really would love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, no, I think one of the first points that you made here this morning is that idea of how are we, as taking off our host hats and putting on our listener hats, how are we finding podcasts? I'm not saying that that's going to give you the right answer necessarily, right? Because your audience's habits might be different than yours. But I do know from working with a lot of new podcasters that they forget to use that as a factor in their research, right? Like just understanding how we consume a podcast and find a podcast, I think is important to add to your research data. So yeah, I think that those are definitely important areas that you shared today, Alex, for sure to focus on.
I think that the other thing is because the internet and this whole thing that we're doing, and I say this in the most loving way, you find your people. Like we're all here. We have no reason to be in this room other than the fact that we had a platform, we found each other because of one particular thing, which is podcasting. But taking that to the next level is everybody's got their own little podcast. Everybody's got their own little world. So again, I think that that's the most important thing is just look inside a little bit and have fun with it. I know that's hard to say because we're this is big business and we're all trying to be making money and everything else. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't because I don't want Ralph to have a heart attack over there. But at the same time, you got to have fun with it. And I think that's the biggest thing when we're doing this because that's why they have A and B testing or A and C, A, B, C, D, E, F testing. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Okay, let's dig deeper into this article here. Ralph, where should we go from here?
Yeah, I want to get into the report now. And let's move into what I titled the first segment. That's the big shift. And what this article says is that listening apps are acquisition channels. We have to realize that the first big idea is that podcast apps are not passive shelves anymore. Ausha says that 50% of podcast listeners open up their listening app to find a new show, not just play shows they already follow. And I think that's got to change how we think about Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every listening platform. These apps are not just where your RSS feed goes after you hit publish. They're places where people are actively shopping their next show. And a lot of podcasters obsess over social media discovery, and that makes sense sometimes, but social media discovery and listening app discovery are completely different. Social discovery often starts with a clip, maybe a quote, or some personality. App discovery often starts with a need. I think we need to lean into that. A topic, a category, or a search phrase. Something like a small business podcast, true crime cold cases, or maybe AI marketing show. Maybe something like parenting teenagers, or here's a great one, NBA trade rumors, or daily motivation for entrepreneurs. So Mark, you want to go into our first question here?
I do, Ralph. Thank you for that setup. So let's talk a little bit about this. So I want to dig into how we're doing things, right? So would your show appear when your ideal listeners search the thing that your show is actually about? Do you know that? Have you done that before? And again, Jason, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to you because I know this is an area that's kind of fresh for you, as you said, with the recent rebrand.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, and I'm going to thank Julia Levine for really clarifying this. Her and I sat down and did an episode of my show that'll come out in a couple weeks.
And she's a speaker at EPC, right?
And she's a speaker at EPC, and I know she's a member of the community, and she's been on this show. She's got a long resume. But I know her big focus is podcast SEO, which is why I wanted to have her on my show, because this means a lot to me now. And there's big differences between regular SEO and podcast SEO that you have to be aware of. I believe this article they call it PSO, podcast search optimization. Yes. What I've been trying to do more of, because I think there's still value in the SEO side of things, is I've been creating blog posts for every episode, and that blog post acts as a hub for everything. I've got the video, I've got the audio, I've got a written component that can be help with discoverability for people that are searching intentionally. That to me is the driving force behind this. I feel that when it comes to search, we're all very intentional about what we want to find. And if we focus on that for our podcast and set ourselves up for that extra discoverability, it's going to take things to a new level. Like Ralph said, and I know, Mark, this was a subject you guys talked about, is there fatigue when it comes to that social media clip culture that we have really, I mean, it's the thing. It's the driving thing on social media and with podcasts. are there new ways that we can position ourselves for discoverability and for overall consumption? I like the blog idea personally because it sets up a choose your own adventure for the person that discovers you. They land on your blog, now they can look at the video, they can listen to the audio, they can connect to the proper platform for them to listen, or they can read about it. And it's really their decision. And in my opinion, however they consume my content, if that helps them build trust in me, then I'm doing something right. So another tip, I'll throw this in, I don't know if this is relevant to the topic, but what I've been doing is taking the blog post and making it the link on the podcast. So if anybody clicks on it through the podcast app, it goes right to my blog.
Oh, okay.
So they're getting all that additional information in one click versus I guess, the overall search function of actually being on Google or ChatGPT or Claude, something to that effect.
Jason, I love the strategy, and I am hyper fixating on how you described it as a choose your own adventure. And I'm tying this back to something you said also earlier with your share here, is how, you know, the idea of looking for different and new ways to get people to find you. And I think it would be really kind of cute and fun to have it actually built like a choose your own adventure.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like literally, it's like give them at certain points like the choice to either go watch this as you're reading this article, or instead go listen to this over here. I don't know. There's something just fun about that. I think that could be cool for the right kind of show.
I have a question for Jason. Jason, is your blog your show notes?
Nope.
Oh, so they're two separate
No.
things.
So full transparency, I do use ChatGPT to assist me, and what I do is I take the transcript after I built a pretty detailed brand prompt of what my brand is about, what my podcast is about, and then I have a very long list of what I want the ChatGPT or Claude to do. And then below it, I put in a detailed ask of please write this type of blog post based on this transcript. Do not do a summary of the show. I want you to dig into the actual content so it serves as something additional, and then it breaks it down. And I, of course, then go through it and edit and put it in my own voice from there. But I don't think the show notes, honestly, I used to do that, but I used to get more granular and detailed with the show notes, but then I learned that that's not necessarily something that's a huge factor. So now my show notes are a little bit more punchy. They get to the point. It's basically just a brief description of what you're going to hear and what you're going to learn. So to add another layer to it, I felt like just putting the show notes in place was not going to have any impact. So I took it to the next level, and usually the blog posts are between 600 and 700 words, and it's just become a very easy part of my workflow. Now that I've got everything down to a pretty good science, it's pretty easy to create that content and do the editing and have it published and ready to go. New episode just went out today, folks. So go check everything out.
There it is. And let's check in with BC, who's got something. Go ahead, BC.
Yeah, I did something very similar, and this is based off of something someone on the show suggested months ago, where they said what they did was they let their show marinate for a little bit on Apple and Spotify, then had chat analyze and pick out what key phrases, keywords is my show resonating with the most? What is it matching with? And after some tweaks and whatnot, and what I kind of really wanted my description to look like for each episode, I took all of this huge conversation I eventually had, and I whittled it down into a single command where I say, please apply hybrid analysis, and it will give me 2 SEO focused options for a title, full description, and I do the same thing. I do what Jason did, and I take the transcript and I feed it, say, here's the transcript, hybrid analysis, and it'll provide this whole shebang. And that's what I've been doing with Caffeination Nation, which I'm currently rebranding now. And that's been helping to get some strong downloads over time.
Great tip. Thank you, VC. Appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm going to go to, we got to keep things moving, but I do want to check in with Junaid, who's joined us on stage. Junaid, did you have something specific, or are you just up here for the conversation?
Good morning. Good morning. Very specific things. And I love all of this conversation. And there's so many pieces of content that everybody's mentioning, right? You got a blog post, you got an article, you have a way to, again, bring people back into the episode through different mediums. And that's exactly the trouble I was facing, or I've been doing for the past 8 years on my podcast. And that's exactly what I've built in to the thing that's coming out
Pod
in a
glue.
couple of months. Pod glue.
Yeah, don't be shy.
There you
You're
go.
you're allowed to share, Junaid, because it's a pretty amazing product.
Thank you.
From
Thank you. Yeah,
everything I've
soft
seen.
launching tomorrow. We've got, it's already been in beta. I've got 40 people in beta. So if anybody's open or listening, want to check out Podglue, go over to podglue.com and just reach out to me. Thanks.
You are welcome. I'm really happy for you and excited about that service, product, etc. Junaid, very cool. All right, podglue.com. All right, with that, let's go to Matt, and then Ralph, take it away after Matt. Go for it, Matt.
From all the stuff that I've been learning about SEO, the thing that gets talked about a lot is that ChatGPT and LLMs generally don't have the best track record with suggesting things based on things that you think it knows. So if you type in a command, just on all this LLM use chat, like it's all great, ChatGPT, Claude, to build all your stuff. But being very specific with it is important. So if your phrase that you use in the LLM is create some SEO titles that will attract my type of audience. If you haven't done the work in the LLM to establish what your audience is, what the keywords are, who to direct it to, all that kind of thing, it's not going to give you much value. And despite what Google keyword and Ahrefs and other products like that will tell you, LLMs don't house that information about audience and keyword metric gathering. It takes a very educated guess. So being very definitive and specific with how you prompt and do your research, like getting into Google Ads Manager for free, for example, and doing some keyword research, then bringing those keywords to be competitive into your LLM is going to be the best way to do it. But I think this OSHA article really does outline a few incredibly useful things that you can include in your LLM prompting to get the very specific things that you would need from it.
That's the big key, right? It is being very specific with that prompt, or giving it resources to work from, and not just assume that it knows how to do it without those resources. So yeah, I think that's a really great point, Matt. Thank you for that. All right, Ralph, where are we going next with this article?
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about distribution versus discovery now, because OSHA makes a strong distinction. Publishing everywhere is important, and I agree with that. But publishing everywhere doesn't mean people will find you. The report says many podcasters confuse being distributed with being discoverable. So here's the line of the morning. Distribution is access, discovery is visibility. Distribution answers the question, can someone listen to my show? Discovery answers the question, will someone who needs my show actually find it? And those are two completely different problems. I'm going to give an analogy of this. Think about a book. Your book can technically be in the bookstore, but if it's on the wrong shelf, if it has a vague title, if there's no searchable category, no one recommends it, it may well be invisible. Your podcast has that same issue. You can be in every app and still be buried.
Thank you, Ralph. Yes, Matt, go ahead.
I like that analogy, but I want to take it a bit further, if only to color any statement that I make after this. I am not a huge fan of this article. There are things I'm a fan of, but a lot of it I'm not a fan of. We can get into that later.
Sure.
I think what it's talking about, instead of just books being buried on the shelf, I would think more of a bookshop, where distribution is getting your book on the shelves in bookshops, stick to the American stuff, Barnes & Noble, that kind of thing. But discovery is positioning of the book within the bookshop. If you walk in and there's a big fancy stand with the latest fourth wing iteration there ready for you to stare at as you are looking for the next book you want to read, that prime positioning is going to put you in the spot where you'll be discovered more easily. And what this article talks about quite a lot is the nature of behaviors on Apple Podcasts, where some people go to charts, some people go to search. There are many different ways that you can position yourself in the bookshop to be discovered by doing the things that it suggests.
And Matt, I want to jump in there for a second, because I agree with you. And that's where I probably take a different approach than a lot of people. I pay for advertising for my show because I really believe that discoverability is tough, even in the podcasting apps. As an example, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later if we have time. Like I just made a major purchase on player.fm because what I have seen that works is the needle gets moved when you actually put yourself out there where you're being able to be seen, which is what you're exactly talking about, that showcasing of your show. I did it with Captivate and I grew my audience substantially in about a 6-month period. So I don't think we want to overlook that, Matt. I agree with what you're saying. I think there's a whole lot of hoping if we just distribute it everywhere. It's kind of like the old analogy, if you build it, they will come. I'm not sure that's true. Even if you have great titles and great content and great show notes and great blog posts, I still think there needs to be something that drives them there. This is the reason that people do commercials. And I think we have to, as a podcast, again, if you're in it for the money, you got to be willing to spend some money. Now, if you're a hobby podcast, I get it. You don't want to spend a lot of money doing it. I just want to interject. I know, Mark, you have a question you wanted to get to, but that to me is something we need to talk about because I hear so many people that are so, and even they give me shade sometimes. They're like, I can't believe you're spending money to promote your podcast.
Right.
But it works.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to throw this out there. Like I am number 2 in Christian finance podcast now on Million Pods, number 2. And that is because I'm spending money to grow that. So people see me. Once people see me, then they go and look at the content and go, oh, Ralph knows what he's talking about. But if they never know you're out there, you could have the best content in the world. You could be the best podcaster on the planet. But if nobody knows you're there, you're never going to grow.
Yeah.
So
Go
if
ahead,
you
Matt.
don't mind, Mark, I'd just like to build on the bookshop analogy just a tiny little bit, very quick, because what you're talking about fits in here too. The way I think you're talking about paid growth, paid strategy to get advertised, I see that as not you going to to a bookshop that people go to for books and placement in the store. You're paying to have your book in many different types of bookshops, and you're not going to catch everyone who walks in, but you're going to be exposed to far more people, and the ones that do want to stick with that particular book, and if they want to find it later, they'll know what to find, what to search for, and where they prefer to go for it. And I think keep that book analogy at the back of your mind. I think it really fits in quite well with all the stuff that we're talking about today. But maybe I'm tooting my own horn. I don't know.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go to Alex, who's impatiently waiting. Go ahead,
I
Alex.
have a question. I don't want to go down a long thing with this. But Ralph, I love the fact that you are willing to pay for advertising. But the question that I have is, are we just concerned with the audio podcast? Or are we looking at a bigger strategy of YouTube, all the platforms? Because I think there might be a discussion that might not be for this article, but if you may not get the downloads on the one side, you may get the downloads on the other. And how do you manage that? And if that's not the right question at this time, I understand, but it's what I think needs to be said at this point.
No, and Alex, that's the perfect question. And I look at all the channels. I spent money on YouTube. I've built substantial subscriber lists on YouTube. I've done it on Captivate. I've done it on the audio side. I just launched, all my podcasts are now on Apple Video. That just happened in the last few days. So when somebody goes on Apple now, they can click and they see a little, it's very cool actually. They see a little video icon next to my podcast now. So no, they've got that choice. And we've debated this. I'm not going to get into that. But Alex, no, I think it's a multi-tier strategy. It goes along with Matt's analogy. Is I'm putting myself in as many bookstores as I can find. There's the audio bookstores, there's the video bookstores. I'm doing some online ads. I'm doing meta ads through Facebook. I think you have to take an all-in approach. I mean, truth is, I hired a publicist because I'm trying to get my face out there and the brand, because all of those things build up to where I'm trying to drive this bus. But you can't just take one little pin and say, well, I'm just going to do this. That said, start somewhere and don't try to spread yourself so thin that you don't know what's working, because that's the other side of that, Alex. You have to be really careful, because you could throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and just guess on what's going to stick. So if you're a new podcaster, start with one thing. See how that one thing works. If the one thing works, then try something else, but don't jump into 10 things at once because you're not going to know what's working. So that's my only hesitation, Alex, to broaden it up.
And my follow-up is, because Gabe asked this in the chat, where's the best place to start buying ads? So did you have a, I'm going to do this first. I know you said that, but what was your
what was your strategy?
What was
Absolutely.
your strategy in terms of, am I going to do Facebook ads? What was the first thing you did, if you don't mind going into that?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. So what I did first is I started promoting Facebook. So I started doing boost on Facebook. And I tested that for a while. And what I found is they like to take my money, but it didn't really drive me anywhere.
Yeah.
So and I'm just being honest. It's true.
It's true.
So then I reached out to some people and I said, okay, if I want to really build the audio podcast, where's a good place to do that? And they said, well, you can put ads on Overcast. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I went over to Overcast, and mine's a Christian finance podcast. I bought out the whole bucket of religion and spirituality podcasts. I think I bought 6 ads at once. And within 3 months, I had grown 100 subscribers. That's what I saw when I did that. So I said, okay, that's pretty cool. So Overcast seems to work. And I can look at my statistics and see it. 60% of my listeners come from Overcast. So obviously that makes sense. Now, so the next thing I did is say, well, okay, who else is doing that? I think it was Buzzsprout offers ads. So I said, okay, let me stop the Overcast ads. Let me jump into Buzzsprout. So I did some ads in Buzzsprout. I got a big old fat 0 from that. I got 0 traction from that. That's just me. I'm not saying that that's the case. So I said, okay, let me pivot to something else. And then I said, I'm releasing all these videos on YouTube. Why don't I think about trying to build a subscriber list on YouTube? So that's the next thing I did, Alex. And then, for example, like my weekly sermon show, I just hit 355,000 subscribers. My content creators account, and I'm not saying these things to brag, I'm just telling you why the promotion works. When I launched the content creators accountant back in December, I took the same strategy with that one. Let me go and build a subscriber list. And that's grown to, I think it's like 140,000 now since December. And then when I said, okay, well, let me pause the YouTube and see what happens there. And that's why I just made a contract with player.fm. I talked with somebody in the community and she goes, yeah, I'll get a lot of things from player.fm. So I just met with their ad execs earlier in the week, and I'm going to do a 2-week buy the 1st of June. And I'm going to see, hey, if I spend this much money, what does this do? And then once we get past that, then I'll decide, okay, where am I going next? But those are all brilliant questions, Alex. And like I said, if you want to make money, spend money. That's my philosophy. That's what I tell all my business clients.
I think that's the main thing. I'm sorry, I'm jumping today, Mark.
No, go ahead.
It's like, I think the biggest problem, and whether it's a podcast or something else, people are just looking for that plan. They're willing to spend money. And yeah, some people aren't willing to spend money. I get that. But they just want to know that there is a plan out there. And I think that's the main thing that's going on here.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, good discussion. Actually, a planned one as well, even though I know it was impromptu question from Alex. That was something that we did actually think we would get into this morning, is how are we actually, those of us who are spending money to promote, how are we actually doing that? By the way, just real quick, I know this is an off-topic thing, but it's very quick and just important for me to share. I love these things when they happen. Jessica put in the chat a note to me. She said that she listens to the podcast called Salvage, which is the podcast that we had done a podcast evaluation for about a month or so ago. She says she listens to it every night now. Not something I personally would have chose, yet discovered by the content you promoted, which we weren't really promoting it, right? We were just breaking down that podcast. But that's just also a little shameless plug for our Spotlight series, because clearly our community responds to those other community members who are willing to put their podcast in the spotlight in some way, shape, or form here on the Podcasting Morning Show. So again, that's a shameless plug for podcastingmorningshow.com/spotlight or /eval if you want to have your podcast evaluated here on the Podcasting Morning Show. DR, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question for Ralph. Now, he had said that he tried Buzzsprout, realized it didn't work, and so he pivoted. How long did you give that experiment? Let's call it an experiment. Before you said, nope, this isn't working. I got to try something else.
I did a 30-day test over there. That's what
Okay.
I did. And I just didn't get much traction from it. But again, like I said, that was a limited test. So I don't want to speak and say that those don't work. It just did not work for what I was trying to accomplish.
I'm
Okay.
going to tell you right now, Dr. Buzzsprout is not in the business of making ad money.
Right.
They have to be, without a doubt, the worst when it comes to ads. And when I was at Podfest a couple of years ago, they basically said, they just don't either want to or have the manpower to make it worth a podcaster's time. Because it is a sticking point with me, like you have no idea.
Wait.
It's like you
Yes,
was at
Alex has a
Android.
strong opinion about
No,
Buzzsprout.
it ticks me off because they don't even want to go after ads. And it ticks me off because we're trying to get ads, not produce ads, but get ads. And it's like, guys, I want your business, and they just don't want to give it to us. And it's just a very infuriating thing when you're on that cusp of trying to make a couple of pennies.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too, right? Because I know I have several clients who are using Buzzsprout's ad feature, I'll call it, and it's pennies. It really is. You don't it's not going to be a moneymaker for a lot of people. I'm sure there are exceptions, so I don't want to just make that a blanket statement. But I do know from my experience, the podcasters that work with me, they don't get much money for those ads. Literally,
Well, Mark,
pennies.
that's that race to the bottom we talk about all the time. That's that CPA race to the bottom. You might as well not even do it to me. That's just my personal view. But what Alex really brings about, I just want to park here for a second. Yes, and Gabe mentioned this in the chat. You got to have a plan. Sit down with somebody who understands this. Reach out to somebody who understands these different platforms, because if you don't have a plan, you're just going to be flailing. And flailing is not a good way to get to success.
Thank you, Ralph. And I think, Dr., did you have something? No? Okay. There, she took her hand down. Okay. So on Riverside, just like here on Clubhouse, you can raise your hand. And sometimes we forget to take those off here on Riverside. No problem. Let's see. Junaid, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I want to mention is all of these platforms have a much smaller monthly active user number, and that's why those ads don't perform as well. For a larger company, they can spend a larger amount of money and get that return back, but they're looking for exposure. But YouTube has one of the largest monthly active users that are spending time on multiple devices. So when you put an ad on YouTube, it's going to give you more substantial trackable results. Plus, look at YouTube. They are, they are one of the largest search engine. They are, partnered up with, or they're part of Google, which has been doing ads for many, many years. And boom, there you go. They have the results, they have the experience, and that's why it works so much well. And Ralph, amazing track record of experimenting all of this. And we need folks like this that are already done the experiments. So then we folks that don't have that much to spend know exactly where to go. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the beauties of this show is we have such a variety of content creators here that are doing things in all sorts of different ways, and that's the positive feedback that we often get here on the show. Is that's why podcasters tend to enjoy this show. Is it's not just one person shoving information down your throat. It's a bunch of podcasters and content creators sharing and exploring their different ways of doing things. So yeah, good point there. All right, so Ralph, where should we go from here with this article?
I want to get into the spicy part, Mark.
Okay.
So when we had this article,
Hey, you know what? I want to cut you off real quick and just say, if you're not watching the video, you got to come check out Ralph. He's got the cowboy hat on, the Thursday cowboy hat. He's got his T-shirt on. I like podcasts, which unfortunately the camera's kind of cutting it off, so it kind of just says I like. But that's okay. All right, sorry, Ralph.
I'm not offending anybody today because
you just like everybody.
But let's move into this next part. So Alsha says that Apple Podcasts and Spotify do not index podcast metadata the same way. So according to Alsha's breakdown, Apple indexes, and this is important for you to understand because I really didn't even understand this until I read this article again. Apple indexes show titles, episode titles, and author names. Those are the three things that they claim that they index. Spotify indexes show titles, show descriptions, episode titles, episodes descriptions, and author names. So the same podcast can be optimized differently depending on the platform. And that makes SEO podcasts more important, but also more annoying because there's not one universal rule book. Apple and Spotify are looking at different signals. So here's an example of what we're talking about here. On Apple, your show title, episode titles, and author name carry a lot of importance. That's important to them. On Spotify, your descriptions also matter, which means your written metadata can do more work. So when people say descriptions matter, their answer may be they matter where the platform indexes them. And that creates a strategic tension. You don't want to stuff your show title with awkward keywords. And we've all seen these, or these ridiculous keyword stuffing. You also don't want to write poetic episode titles that tell the listener nothing. Here's an example. A title like The Moment Everything Changed or The Moment Everything Changed may sound dramatic, but search has no idea what that means. A better title might be The Moment Everything Changed, How Spotify Search Impacts Podcast Growth. Both of those things are human and still clear, but much easier to find.
Thank you, Ralph. So then knowing that Apple and Spotify might treat the titles, descriptions, and metadata differently, how much does that change the way we're thinking about writing our episode titles and descriptions now? And again, Jason, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to you just because, again, as somebody who has more recently did a big rebrand, I'm just curious, like, would that now change how you're going to submit your episodes to Apple versus Spotify?
Well, for one, I'm doing it through Buzzsprout, so it's all going to distribute the
Right.
same, right?
Yeah.
But I know that this is what's funny about this, and I think it's all cyclical. I remember I went through a podcast audit a few years ago on a show, and the guy that did it told me that I should be maximizing the characters in my show notes because that's going to help with visibility. And now I think that meant nothing.
Yeah.
And there's also that saying of, well, you should, what is it, record for your audience, write for Google. Okay, yeah, there's a small element of truth to that, but not in the description, not in the show notes. And so, yeah, that's why when I started looking at it, I said, I'm going to change this up because it's not necessary to really get super involved with my show notes and try to do this epic, almost secondary blog post because what difference does it make? It should focus more on what my listener found. Like, okay, they found my show. What's this episode about? It's a quick description. There's a few key takeaways that I know they're going to walk away with. That's my show note structure now. I think that's the way we have to look at it. If you've been agonizing over this long-winded blog-like show note structure, you can give yourself a break. Even if you have ChatGPT writing it for you. This is something I know that I'm starting to figure out new ways with my clients to figure their show notes out because I'm just putting less emphasis on it. And like I texted you when I was reading that article this morning, Mark, it blows my mind that that's not more important to Apple.
Yeah.
Right? Like it is what it is, but I just felt like this is something that should be more prevalent in the overall game that we're playing. But
yeah,
I guess they have their reasons. So.
I hear you. Okay, so let's go to BC, and I know Ralph and Matt both want to chime in as well. So first, BC, go ahead.
For me, this is exactly why I have my hybrid analysis. If we got these two massive platforms that treat the content identity of your show, or different parts, I should say, of your content identity different ways, then both should be provided that, in my opinion, the right opportunity each time you provide new content to your distributor, especially if your show is distributed to both those same massive platforms. So that's why I like to make sure, that's why I went through the whole process of making it, and I'm hoping in the long run it does what I needed to, and with consistency, of course, on my end, helps to earn the rankings and build it into something. Sorry, got like allergies, but build it into something worthwhile.
All right. Yeah, I love how he threw in that he has allergies. He's trying to avoid us playing the jingle on him. I know the words are hard in the morning jingle.
I mean, if you gotta. I mean,
no, we don't want to overuse it. We will.
No, I'm gonna vouch. His pollen count is insane right now.
Yeah,
I've had to go off camera a couple times too.
Yeah,
nuts.
it is thick right
I
now.
mean, when
Yes.
trees fall around here, it leaves a silhouette of the tree in the air. Like it's that bad.
Yeah.
The tree is still there when the rest goes down. It's horrible.
Yeah. All right. Ralph, did you still have something?
Yeah. The thing I wanted to mention is one of the things that I changed up on my show titles, I made them all questions because I thought about it and I said, I wonder if I make my show titles questions, if people type in questions into the search, would it work?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a real big bump when I did that.
Oh, yeah.
So on my daily show, every single title is in the form of a question because I want people to scroll and go, oh, that's a really good question. I wonder if he's going to answer it. Now, of course, I make sure I answer the question. But I honestly, Jason, going back to the show notes thing, dude, does anybody read those?
Well,
Because
that's
seriously, I just
Yeah,
wonder,
right.
like, your true
No,
believers,
that's-
maybe the people who really want to find something, they might read those. Other than above that, dude, I don't know that they're even worth putting on their show anymore. That's my personal opinion. That's a strong thing
No.
to say, but I just don't know if there's any value at all.
I think you're definitely onto something there, and that's where, like I said, that guy that did that audit for me a few years ago, when he said that, that was my question. I was like, why do I need this long-winded big book in my show notes if no one's going to read it? Well, that's what helps you rank. Like, okay, that's what you say, but we learned that's not the case. So I'm with you there. I was laughing, Ralph, because you said that thing about the questions. I'm not kidding. This morning, I started thinking about doing a 5-minute episode per week based on a question.
Yeah.
That was how I was going to title it. And then just answer the question, have a video series and part of the podcast. So maybe, okay, you're saying it works. Now, that, I mean, this is a sign, right? I have to move forward with this.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
and-
the idea too.
And it also transfers over to YouTube too, because I post my stuff on YouTube. So
Right.
if somebody goes on to YouTube and says, I'll give you a great example of that. How do I convert my IRA to a Roth IRA? That may be a name of a show. Well, Chris, guess what? That's going to score real high on SEO because the person's asking that specific question. And here comes Ralph with the answer.
Yep, that was wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Glad I came on today.
Glad you're here, Jason. Let's see. Let me go to DR and then Matt, because we haven't talked a lot to DR today. Go ahead, DR.
Okay, so when it comes to show notes, I've switched strategies with one of my clients. I used to do like a kind of a blog paragraph, and then it went into the big H2 subtitles and 4 bullet points under each subtitle. And then, of course, all the links. So the switch I made was just the introduction paragraph and then all the links that are mentioned in the show. And there is one link there for full podcast show notes. Go here. And those are on the website. Those are on her website with the H2, subtitles and the bullet points and all of that. So there is a place for them. I just don't think that place is in your phone any longer, like on your player any longer. I think it's probably better on the website.
Fascinating. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that strategy, DR. And all right, Matt, you're up. Go for it.
There's a couple of things I'd like to address. The first one is that the tactical change of making a title a question. I think what you guys might be missing, not missing, but like maybe not unaware of, is that when you create a title that's a question, you have to intentionally think about the question that you're going to answer for someone as a listener. And the listener, putting yourself in the listener's shoes, is the fastest way for you to create content for them. So I think it absolutely makes sense that across both platforms, like I don't think it's a platform specific strategy anymore. I think it's a human behavioral intention for you to target specific things that your audience wants. And it applies everywhere. Not to dismiss it as effective, but I think why it's effective is really important to nail, because articles like this that pop up, and I've been tracking this discussion as we've been going through, we've been gradually whittling ourselves down, optimizing and sharing and optimizing down to the tactical. And the tactical is great, but understanding the fundamentals, everything that sits abstractly above that can dictate everything you do afterwards, is super important, because there's going to be another podcast player or another platform that just shows up out of nowhere. And then I can guarantee you, every single podcast host, every single blog is going to be 10 blogs long of how to optimize your content for this new Plopify or whatever it's going to be. I don't know. Slopify. Let's go with that. So the key thing is abstract that strategy. Think about how it affects human behavior. Think about the listener, and then the tactic that matches that is going to be what's optimal. Now, show notes, whether it has to have content in it or not, I think shows stand out when they have very little content and provide no context. It's a good tease in the right kind of approach. But the thing that I do want to point out with this article is the entire premise of this entire discussion, which is in one of the first paragraphs of the article, that I think should frame how we treat any kind of advice that was included here. They say the stat, reframe how every professional podcast operation thinks about platform strategy. 50% of podcast listeners opening their listening app specifically to find a new show. Where is that number from? Where did they get it?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they saying it? And why are they talking about podcast app navigation in a world where we are very familiar with contextual SEO? I think they said, I mean, this is an AI generated article, no problem. See if you can find the quietly in there, because it's in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the premise here, they've set you up for it. Everything that they cover in it, as generic as the advice is framed in the context of someone who's going into Podcast Addict or Apple Podcasts or Spotify and doing something. Now, what is that one something that they're doing? And how can we give you 12,000 articles and 12,000 tips for you to over-optimize and overthink and feel tired and fatigued? Oh, if only Osher had a way for me to do this more simply. Guess what? There's 3 or 4 off-ramps into their product in this entire article. The framing of this discussion, all of this tactical stuff, it's great. But the discussion we had earlier that Ralph and I kind of bounced off there, being intentional with your strategy, taking the time to very intentionally target things, figure out your keywords, figure out all of that stuff that informs what you do with your approach. Take your time and spend that time exploring what your audience is, where they are. And more importantly, if we have to have an article 6 or 7 years on talking about the same stuff we were talking about podcast players before YouTube stepped into the scene, maybe the solution is the website, the newsletter, the blog, the different ways to engage people where they are. I mean, I don't know how this article is where it is in the place that we're in now, where email lists are probably the most effective way to target listeners. It just baffles me. So the thing that I want people to take away from this is it's okay to hunt for tactics, but make sure in articles like this that you look for the purpose and the reason that it's there. And it was in 3 paragraphs that I figured out exactly what they're trying to nail and how many times their product will appear in the article. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I think that was really important to say. And I think one of the things I love about this show, and when Matt joins us, whether he realizes it or not, he always wraps us up really nicely on this show. and so I appreciate that about you, Matt, among many things. But Jason, I know you wanted to chime in, so go for it.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin that as a wrap-up because it's way better than what I'm going to say. But I will say that I did have a little bit of that feeling as I was reading it as well, because as I was going through it, I felt like this has quickly moved into being a very well drawn-out sales pitch. And then when we got to the bottom, it was, oh, well, we have this and this and this. And yeah, okay, great. Fine, but it is what it is. The ironic twist that I want to put on all of this with discoverability is the fact that we are sitting here on May 21st, 2026, and this podcast will live on in infamy and be set up to be discovered by someone that might be listening to this in 2028, in 2030. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that maybe when you hear this, the show notes thing, maybe it's important again. Maybe it's something that we have discovered is actually going to help our podcast.
Right.
That's what I love about this stuff. It's just so funny to think like we're talking about it today in this context of it's not helping, to where someone might find this show 5 years from now and the game has completely changed. So let's keep that in mind. And again, that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like I'm ruining Matt's great wrap up by
Not at all.
pontificating about nothing.
Not at all. I think that that's a great point. And let me just make sure, Matt, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, please save this.
Not at all. It was great. The one thing I did want to include in here at some point, which I won't go into detail about, but just to say, if you're doing research on SEO for yourself to discover how to do it most effectively on your own website, this article is an excellent example where it has backlinking to its own blog content, H1s and H2s, bullet points, images, probably alt text in those images. It's doing all the right things. So if you completely ignore the content and just scan how they've built this, SEO masterclass right there.
Yeah, thank you. And listen, here's one of the things that another thing that I think is beautiful about this show is, yeah, there could be some things to question about this particular article and some of the other articles that we cover for that matter. But the point is that what we do here is we break it down, and then what's more important to us is sharing our different strategies, our different approaches, et cetera. And these articles help bring those things out in us so that we can pass that on to you as our audience, as our community. So I just want to make sure you understand that, yeah, we get it. We know that a lot of these articles are AI generated, that there may be some things to question about them, but the whole point is really to create conversation. And speaking of conversations, Ralph, do you want to share with us what's coming up tomorrow?
Absolutely. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about building a community. We're going to lean into, am I actually building a community? With our community being, on Fridays, we've kind of had this theme of community and sharing our wins. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow is, how do you know if you're actually building a community? I think it's going to be a great discussion. So make sure you join us tomorrow on the show.
Yeah, and that reminds me of my talk at Podfest this past year, where, and it's appropriate because of something you said earlier, Ralph, when you talked about you don't necessarily believe in that philosophy of if you build it, they will come, right? And I said at my talk at Podfest, I agree with you. I don't believe in that either. But what I do believe in is if you build community, they will come. And I'll explain more about that tomorrow too. But I think that if we focus first on community, a lot of other things will fall into place, including those download numbers, those listener rating, the rates, and what do I mean? Sorry, the retention rates, etc. So we'll dig into all of that tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that conversation anytime we're talking about community. So join us tomorrow. And until then, make it a great day, everybody. Take care. Very nice. Thank you, gang.